Welcome students. Today I am going to talk about English literature as an optional subject for civil services main exam. Actually, the purpose of this video is to discuss the syllabus and the questions that are asked in UPSC civil services, but the video will be beneficial for the aspirants of UPPSC and BPSC as well, though the syllabus of BPSC is slightly different. Some of the texts are different. For example, in UPSC, you have to go through Sons and Lovers of D.H. Lawrence, while in BPSC, you have to go through The Rainbow. But mostly the authors are the same. So the basic things of preparation that you are required to do while preparing for civil services main exams are the same. That's why you can also follow the suggestions. Before coming to the point, I will talk about one thing that always puzzled me, but I also somehow managed to find an explanation, that those students who are pursuing their postgraduate with English literature as their specific subject, even those students are very much apprehensive of taking this subject as their optional. The reason may be various, but the most important reason I think is the unavailability of material, the unavailability of guidance, mentorship, coaching institutes, you can say. But those students forget that the syllabus itself suggests that you don't have to look for material from outside. All you need to focus is your core text. The first-hand reading of all the core texts prescribed are necessary, and that's almost cover 70% of your requirements, 60 to 70% of your requirements. I don't mean to say that you don't need to go through any other material, you don't need to know the basics of literature, but that's only a part of it, and you should treat those materials only as such. Your syllabus, the questions asked in the previous year exams show that the UPSC want to know your own understanding of literature. And particularly, most of the questions are asked from non-literary viewpoint. It shows that UPSC wants to know your understanding of the social, the philosophical, religious, political milieu of the period in which those texts evolved. Apart from the core texts, there are certain terms that have been mentioned in your syllabus, and it is suggested that the first-hand knowledge of those key terms are required from you. So, your first paper includes Renaissance, metaphysical poetry, epic, mock epic, satire, neoclassical period, romantic revival, Victorian period. All these terms you are supposed to be acquainted with, familiar with. And the questions may also be asked from that perspective. Means the question may be asked to know what you understand, how you take these literary trends or these periods. Renaissance also includes Elizabethan and Jacobean period. So then come to the text, the core text. You have many writers prescribed, and every writers have some texts as well. You have two of Shakespearean dramas, King Lear and The Tempest. Then you have John Donne, the greatest of metaphysical poets, and his 5 poems. The good morrow, death be not proud, the relic, to his mistress going to bed. Then you have Milton, some of the texts of Paradise Lost, some of the books of Paradise Lost. Then Wordsworth from Romantic Revival, and you have Tintern Abbey, Immortality, Ode, Milton, Thou shouldst be living at this time, The world is too much with us, 3 years she grew, all these poems. And then finally, before Wordsworth, we also have to go through Alexander Pope's Rape of the Lock, which is the representative text of neoclassical period. Then we have Henrik Ibsen with his Doll's House. All these writers and texts in which we have dramas, we have poems, are in the section A of the first paper. Then in section B, we have novelists, starting from Jonathan Swift and his text Gulliver's Travels. Though technically it is not a full-fledged novel, still it has been recommended here. Then we have Jane Austen, Henry Fielding, Charles Dickens, Thomas Hardy, and finally Mark Twain. So all these texts are in the first paper, section A and section B. In second paper, you have again some literary trends mentioned, and you are supposed to understand the basics of those literary trends. For example, you have modernism, the poets of the 30s. Then you have colonial and post-colonial writings. Then postmodernism. You are also supposed to know psychoanalytic Marxism, psychoanalytical literary theory, and feminism. So here I must mention one thing, that sometimes these literary trends are applied to the questions of the first paper. Though these literary trends have been mentioned in the second paper, but you may be asked a question, simple question, bring out the post-colonial element in Shakespeare's The Tempest. And you will have to remember the conversation between Prospero and the monster, where he has managed to reach after the tempest and he has colonized the entire island. Caliban, that monster's name is. Her mother has been just confined by Prospero. The treatment of Prospero, the reaction of Caliban, the treatment of Prospero to other people such as Ferdinand, to treatment towards his daughter Miranda, and their reaction, all these things should come in your mind while dealing with such questions. And you will find the post-colonial elements in that writing. Though the text has been written in colonial period, it was the golden period of colonialism. It was just the European companies were going out of Europe to start their trade, and in fact they were looking for new geographical discoveries. The America was discovered. The Vasco da Gama had already landed in India. All this, amid all these developments, those texts appeared, and you have to deal with this question that the post-colonial element has to be brought out, has to be deciphered in that particular drama. So you have to be open-minded while going through your texts. You have to develop your own understanding of those texts. So let's come to the texts on and authors prescribed in the second paper. In second paper, in section 1, you have W.B. Yeats, his Leda and Swan, Tower, The Second Coming, and all those poems. Then you have T.S. Eliot with his love songs of J. Alfred Prufrock, The Journey of Magi, and Burnt Norton. Then you have W.H. Auden, then Philip Larkin. You also have two dramas, Look Back in Anger and Waiting for Godot. Then you have Philip Larkin and A.K. Ramanujan. In the section B, you have to go through certain novels. James Joyce's The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Joseph Conrad's Lord Jean, D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers, Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, and Raja Rao's Kanthapura, and V.S. Naipaul's A House for Mr. Viswas. All these texts have to be studied, and you really have to go through all these texts. You cannot just go through guides and materials and just manage to write your answer, because you will not be able to write at all. Actually, literary questions are not directly asked, and that's why I said in the beginning of this lecture that you don't need to look for material and guidance, because too much of it will obliterate your own understanding. And don't let any guide do that, even me. So what should you do? You should start by going through syllabus first. Just understand the limits of your syllabus, the exact periphery of your syllabus. You have to go through Renaissance. You have to know the basics of Elizabethan and Jacobean period, the literary trends of that period, the socio-political and religious developments of that period. The Renaissance, is a period of cultural awakening, and Elizabethan period, during Elizabethan period, it was the heyday of the literary development in England and Europe as a whole, you can say. Then something very unfortunate happened. The monarchy was destabilized with the execution of King Charles I. All these things have to be in your mind while going through the text. No, I again repeat that you don't have to focus too much on the literary aspect of your texts, because as a student of English literature, you are generally tempted to focus more and more on the literariness of a text. But in UPSC, this is the real difference. You have to focus on other aspects, non-literary aspects of the text. For example, if you go through King Lear and The Tempest, these dramas were written during Elizabethan and Jacobean period respectively, and the genius of Shakespeare was there. So you have to apply all your understanding of that period while going through the text, while understanding the text, and that will only help you. For example, the influence of Renaissance, the influence of Reformation on these texts can be understood, can be in your can be just pointed out while going through these texts. Suppose the chief characteristics of Renaissance were the humanism, a new belief in humanism, human activities, human potential, the discovery of a new geographical realm outside Europe, new scientific revolutions. All these things contributed to a new mindset in the entire Europe in general and in England in particular. And most of your textbook authors prescribed are British. So you have to focus on the developments in England. You can just confine your study to that region, that territory, because you can say you don't have the time to enjoy literature. You have to focus on your exam, and if you miss out that, you will miss out everything. So just be precise. That's why I am repeating again and again to go through your syllabus first. Then, to understand the basics of syllabus, I have also said in the beginning of this lecture that I don't mean that you should only focus on your core text and that will do everything for you. You are supposed to know the basics of literature. You are supposed to understand how to approach a literary text. Even when you have to focus on non-literary aspects of the text, you have to know the basics of literature. And for that purpose, you should go through a book, An Introduction to the Study of Literature, written by W.H. Hudson. Apart from that book, you should have with you any book of history of English literature. You can go for either Routledge history or David Datches or even Edward Albert. Whatever suits you is best for you. I am not recommending any particular book, but I recommend that you are supposed to have a book on history of English literature. Apart from history, if you go through a book that will give you an idea of all the social, cultural, and religious developments of that period, non-literary developments of that period, means history book, general history book, that will be an added advantage for you, you can say. Then I just mentioned Shakespeare, that what you should look for while going through these texts, the characteristics of Renaissance reflected in those texts, the characteristics of Reformation reflected in those texts, if there are any, the characteristics of new geographical discoveries, the aspects related to colonial expansion, the imperial expansion, and their eulogistic approach in that expansion. All these things should be noticed because the question is being asked from post-colonial point of view as well. Again, when you go through John Donne, you can notice the slight deviation from that period, from his just general writers of the of his age, his contemporaries and precursors. There may be a great difference noticeable in the poems of in the Fairy Queen of Spenser and any other poem of any of the poems of John Donne. So, what are the causes of this deviation? Was there any real deviation, or it was only superficial? Why he is called metaphysical? What is the meaning of, what is the implication of metaphysical? All these things should be uh, noticed, and you should have an understanding of all these things. Then, for example, he compares his mistress with America. This sounds very abrupt at first reading, but when you analyze the text, when you analyze the poem, when you get to know really about John Donne and his writing style, you will understand that how deeper meaning his poems contain. Actually, he was often, very often criticized and called with a pejorative sense by his contemporaries and immediate successors. The term metaphysical itself was used pejoratively for him, but after the lapse of 3 centuries, T.S. Eliot and his followers, other modern followers, just changed the perspective about John Donne and his uh, other contemporaries, other poets of that school, metaphysical school, so-called metaphysical school. T.S. Eliot proposed the doctrine of unification of sensibility and associated this doctrine with the poems of John Donne. He clearly said that he was the greatest poet in the history of English literature. His thought and ideas were one, were unified. That was not possible in any other poets. So all these things changed, the perspective changed, and John Donne began to be revered as one of the greatest poet in the history of English literature after T.S. Eliot established him. The perspective of the readers also changed about him. But in his poems, all these things become less important when you understand the just presentation of the different movements of his period. He is comparing his mistress with America because he is referring to the adventures involved in the discovery of America and comparing it with the adventure of his discovery of a new woman. And the colonialists want to explore America. It's a beautiful country, and similarly, John Donne wants to explore his mistress. The colonialists still don't know anything about America, and John Donne still does not know anything about his mistress. So the comparison is quite natural, but it does not sound so commonplace in the poem in the first reading. So you have to be you are supposed to be mentally so agile as John Donne expects you to be while reading his poem. But because he presented the socio-cultural, religious, all the aspects into his poem in the course of his arguments, and you have to just cope up with the pace of the poet while reading his poem. He mixed the new scientific revolutions with the medieval scholastic philosophies, because the entire generation, not only John Donne, the entire generation, a major section of that generation, you can say, was not comfortable with the pace of the development of that period. People believed in geocentric world, and the Copernicus uh, came and just proposed that it is not geocentric, it is rather heliocentric. So the universe at once became decentered for John Donne, and that mindset is reflected in the poems. So you can always see sun being chided in his poem, being mocked in his poem. So these are the things you should notice while going through different authors. In Milton as well, you can just have the Renaissance spirit, the reformatory zeal, all these things. And just it was only the Renaissance spirit of Milton that he knowingly or unknowingly presented Satan in a different way, as William Blake said that Milton has knowingly or unknowingly made Satan the hero of Paradise Lost. And it is true. The poem opens with Satan. The entire narrative, all through the narrative, we can see him just conspiring against God, and finally he succeeds in his purpose by tempting Eve to get that forbidden fruit. And through Eve, he also successful in tempting Adam. And so the purpose of God is frustrated. The Satan, in a way, emerges victorious. So Satan is presented as a hero, and this is the democratic zeal, the republican zeal, the reformatory zeal, and the a kind of Renaissance spirit, the spirit of freedom is there in Milton that must have worked in just writing this kind of poem where Satan emerges as such an important character. At least if we don't follow the words of William Blake word by word, we should accept the fact that Satan is one of the main characters, and he is in no way less important than other characters of the poem. If Paradise Lost is read purely as a poem, as a literary creation, however, it is based on a biblical story, so obviously, finally, the God and his sons emerges in a positive light, and Satan emerges as a villainous character. But finally, he is one of the most important character. So all these things should be kept in mind while going through these texts. Again, if we go through Alexander Pope's Rape of the Lock, you can find the influence of that age, the socio-political condition of that age. After the lapse of a few years, people were fed up with republicanism, and monarchy was restored in England. Actually, if you go through the entire history of English literature, you will notice different milestones, and this is a brief lecture, and in our subsequent lectures we will deal every period prescribed in your optional in detail, but here we are only giving a brief introduction. That's why I'm not going into detail, but I am giving you an idea that after restoration, the the level of literature just was in a state where it needed to be improved, enhanced, and the Writers of that period took note of that, and Dryden and Pope took the command of restoring the level of literature. So they prescribed uh, rules and some rules and regulations, and insisted that literature should adhere to those rules. But it was very difficult for all the writers to produce a variety of literature following a particular rule. And that is why very few emerged as a master during this period. And you can say Alexander Pope is the greatest master of that art, and he wrote his masterpiece Rape of the Lock in mock heroic vein in a satiric tone. He satirized the fashion, the mannerism of his period in his poem. The lock of Belinda has been cut by a baron, and this simple event is inflated into the level of an epic, you can say, and that's why it is called mock epic. Again, we have Romantic Revival. Obviously, the rules and regulation made the literature monotonous and trite, and that's why a revolt against those rules and regulation was imminent, and that was just sounded. That flag of revolt was unfurled in 1798 by with the publication of Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge. Both these writers collaborated in the creation of that work, Lyrical Ballads, and though the companionship of Coleridge was very important in the evolution of Wordsworth as a poet, he is generally considered the greater of the two. Some of the poems are there for you, and you will notice the difference in tone and difference in the selection of diction, everything from the work of the previous period and between the works of the previous period and this period, means the work of Alexander Pope and the works of William Wordsworth. Then we have Tennyson. After Romantic Revival, it did not survive more than 35 years, and then there was a different kind of development going on in England. There was Industrial Revolution and its ramifications. There was a sense of complacency, but at the same time there was a dilemma as well, and all these things changed the perspective of the people, and a part of it can be deciphered in Tennyson's In Memoriam because it belonged to that period. Then we have Henrik Ibsen's The Doll's House. Henrik Ibsen's drama is a new kind of drama. In the field of drama I'm talking about, because he is one of the proponents, pioneers of the art for art's sake. Actually, he believed, as opposed to the earlier belief system, that literature should not have any palpable design, as in the words of Keats. Henrik Ibsen thought that literature should teach as well. The entertainment is not the only purpose of literature. It should not be. Literature can teach and reform as well. Though he was not the first writer to think so, but it is generally believed that during that period he started a new kind of dramatic writing. G.B. Shaw followed him, though you don't have to go through G.B. Shaw. I only mentioned his name in the context of Henrik Ibsen because the writing style of these two writers were very much similar. Yeah. Generally, it is believed that G.B. Shaw learned a lot from the writings of Henrik Ibsen. So all these things should be in your mind while preparing for English literature, briefly at least. Then you have to reread some of the poets. Don't just worry about that. You can do it. You should do it. In fact, you should do it to just because you have to substantiate your answer with facts, with the quotations from the text, because you will not have the opinions of other to substantiate your answer in UPSC. In literature particularly, that will not give a good impression on the examiner. So you will have to bring out the quotation from the texts. You can also mention the scene if you don't remember the exact text. You can also mention the scene, the context to substantiate your answer. But for that, if you have to go through the texts again and again, you should do it, particularly poems, because it will be very tedious, it will be very time taking to go through all the novels twice or thrice, because you will have limited time. I am aware of that, being a teacher, being a mentor. But you should not hesitate in revising your text if you think it is necessary. If you are not able to understand D.H. Lawrence in the first reading, you will have to go through that book for the second time. You may have some problems in comprehending properly the text of modern period, because there are a stream of consciousness novels, there are psychological novels. All these things may be slightly new for students who are at their graduation level and have started preparing for civil services. So they have to focus on that issue as well. Again, I have already said that I am only giving a brief introduction of how to approach literature, how to study literature for your civil services exams. That's why I am not going to deal with the entire history of English literature. That we will do in the subsequent lectures. I think the example I have given to you, the texts I have talked about will suffice and will be very helpful for you to start your study. But one thing I would like to mention as well, one more thing, that the practice of answer writing is another key to success. Because in other subjects, in other optionals, you can just, if you don't have time and you have points in your mind, you can mention those points. But in literature, you don't have that liberty, because as a student of literature, the examiner expects you to communicate yourself convincingly, lucidly, fluently. You are supposed to give a flow in your answer, and that requires a lot of practice. So when you start reading your first text, core text, I mean, just form your questions, just go through the questions paper of previous years and start practicing writing your answer, because you will not have enough time to write extempore. Everything you will have to depend on your practice. If you practice, it will not help you only in your literature paper, it will also help you in GS paper. But because if you practice writing the answer of a question from literature, your perspective, your skill of presentation, everything changes, and that will help you in the handling of certain social issues. That is a major part of your GS paper. That will help you a lot in writing essay as well. So these are the basics that you should follow while preparing for UPSC with English literature as your optional. I hope this lecture will be helpful for you. If you like the video, if you like the lecture, respond to me in comment box. And if you have any feedback, any negative feedback, you can also, without any hesitation, you can get back to me in comment box. If you like the video, just subscribe to the channel, share it. We will be with you all through your study, and we will upload videos regularly, at least twice a week, depending on your responses. Thank you.